It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Good day to you and welcome to the program. It is County-Wide. Brad Miller with you. And we're happy to welcome into studio a guest that we've chatted with a number of times, and that is Sue Rutherford. Sue's the executive director of the TIP of Arizona, the Trauma Intervention Program of Arizona, assisting largely female volunteers, ladies, who've gone through some extensive training. We'll talk about that today. There's some more of that coming up to help our police, fire, our emergency responders at the scene with folks who perhaps a loved one is under stress or been involved in an accident or even has passed. There are people who are out there who help to talk with families and kind of prepare them for what is going to happen. And Sue, we thank you so much for doing that, spearheading this. We were just chatting about how important that has become to fire and police agencies, and it's just ingrained. You're part of the system now. The TIP program is.
Yes, the TIP program is part of the system now. Yes.
Yeah, it is something. There's going to be some training coming up in Prescott on April 19th in Prescott, and then on the 26th in the Verde Valley, and we'll chat about that. But Sue was nice enough to share with us just this morning, Paul David and I, some of your own personal history, and that's one thing I don't think we've touched on much. Just the kind of question, how did you get involved to become such a spearhead, for this program, not just locally? You work nationally on this program.
Yes, I do.
Tell me how you got in.
That?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, when I was retiring from nursing in 1999, I didn't know what I wanted to do. What was I going to do with my life? And this came about. This program actually started in 1986 by a psychologist who had people sitting in his chair who were dealing with traumas that had occurred many years previously. And his thought was, if you could put somebody with them immediately, we call that, it's kind of like the golden hour when somebody has a heart attack. Yeah. If they are taken to an adequate facility within an hour, they have a better chance of survival. It's the same thing with what we do. If we can get somebody with them within that golden hour, they probably have a better chance of not sitting in that therapist, that counselor's chair 20 years down the road still dealing with the same thing. So I looked at that and decided that sounded for a good fit for me, and I decided to go into it. And then since then, immediately the president and CEO, the psychologist who started the program, got me more involved. And so I became a national trainer. And I've been doing that probably the last 10, 11 years. And I travel a lot around the U.S. I train emergency personnel, and I also train citizens to do this type of program, what we do.
It's just extraordinary. I didn't know how kind of locally grown this was, because when we first started to hear about it here at the radio stations, we, your name was right in the middle of it. And I think one of the fire folks said, hey, here's somebody you should talk to. And we've done that many times since. Can I ask, were you an IR nurse? Or an ER nurse? I'm sorry.
I worked high-risk labor and delivery.
Okay.
I've lived up in Yavapai County for 30 plus years, but I was one of those that drove down to St. Joe's and Phoenix and would work a couple days a week.
Okay, the reason I ask, I'm thinking that if you're in the ER and those kinds of things, you're going to have a lot of, very sudden events, not medical. And I know they're both very traumatic, but very sudden events and I just wondered if this grew out of that.
It did. Well, what happened to me is when you work in that field, we're not trained, at least when I went through it, and it's been a while, but we were not trained in how to talk to people. We're trained in how to deal with the emergency, the medical emergency. The same with the firefighters and the police officers. We're trained in that immediate thing, but we're not trained what to say. And there's times where we believe we're doing the right thing, we believe we're saying the right thing, and we are not. When I think back to when I worked throughout the 80s and the 90s as a nurse, and I think back to those years of what I probably said to people, and I might have I hope I didn't cause more harm than good.
Yeah.
And since then, since I've come into this, I've learned what to say and what not to say, and then how to teach other people that.
Let's talk about, for the uninitiated, we've chatted many times about trauma intervention, the program, and the volunteers and what they do, but for the uninitiated among our audience who maybe hasn't heard about the program, can you kind of give, we'll talk training in a moment, but once a fully trained volunteer is out there, tell me what she does. And then we'll talk a little bit about why it's usually a she as well. But what does a TIP volunteer do?
The TIP volunteers, there are volunteers that respond when requested by the emergency personnel, so the firefighters, the hospital, the police, the law enforcement, when there has been any type of crisis. Most often it's death related, but it can be anything, a medical emergency, a structure fire, any type of crime. And then we go to provide emotional support and practical support during the first few hours of that crisis. So we're called out immediately when it has occurred. And our average response time is it's under 30 minutes, but it depends on where the volunteer lives and where they're going. And our volunteers do 3 12-hour shifts a month, and they pick their shifts, and then during that shift, they have to be able to go wherever we're requested.
What is it divided up, I guess, geographically?
Yes, we have 2 chapters within TIP of Arizona. Only Yavapai County is the only in the Arizona that has this program. And so on Yavapai County, we split it between the mountains. So we have the Verde Valley side, Verde Valley Sedona side, and then we have the Prescott side. So the volunteers are either side. They don't have to cross the mountain to respond. It just would take too long.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
How do the TIP volunteers become notified? For fire, you call 911.
Yes.
How do your volunteers get dispatched, if you will?
That's a good question. We have our own dispatch system, just like 911, and our dispatchers communicate with the 911 dispatch, and then they initiate the volunteer out. They get it going. So.
Okay. This, you mentioned, because we'll hear it all the time. And when I say we, I mean in the newsroom, we've got the scanners running on the police and fire frequencies. And there's many calls, many times. You'll hear the fire guys talking about this truck goes there, but then you'll also hear about TIP has arrived, or TIP volunteer is en route, or what have you. And it goes back to what we said at the start of the show about how this has come just synonymous with an emergency call out, is that a TIP volunteer will be part of this. Yes.
We are a part of the emergency system now, you might say, when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And so they call us out. It's very difficult. I even forgot what your question was, or if there was a question.
What I'm getting to is the volunteer part of it, that you've become such a part of this, that it seems to me that I don't know if we have a lot of population growth anymore. We've heard about kind of declining them and so on, but the demand is still there. You were telling me before the show.
Yes.
For volunteers, because economically there's been some folks that have maybe fallen out of the ranks and that kind of thing. You need volunteers right now.
Yes, we do need volunteers, because even if the population is decreasing, if people are moving, we have a lot of elder population, and they tend to have needs that we are called to assist with. And we have, there's been a lot of suicides the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So those, for us in TIP, have increased. And so there's quite the need out there for volunteers.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the upcoming training sessions. Who makes a good volunteer? As I listen to the program, I think, well, it might be for me, but there's some very serious business that you're going to have to learn about and understand and become involved in. So we'll talk a little bit more about that with our guest today, Sue Rutherford, the Executive Director, Trauma Intervention Program for Arizona. We'll be back right after this.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100. or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
Thousands of fires across the United States are caused by careless people. Hi, I'm Fire Marshal Rick Contreras with the Cottonwood Fire Department. The major threat of human-caused fires are from burning debris that get out of control or improperly extinguished or unattended campfires. Remember that fireworks have no place on our wildlands. Become part of the solution. Learn more about proper fire safety by contacting your local fire department.
The pain will not control us. It will never break us, define us, or keep us still. Because arthritis can't beat us if we beat it first. In the fight against arthritis, you need a weapon. What's yours? Visit the Arthritis Foundation at fightarthritispain.org.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
We're back to the program. Sue and I chatting even through the break. There's so much good information, and let's talk about volunteers. Sue Rutherford is the executive director of the Trauma Intervention Program, TIP of AZ, as it is commonly called, and that's also where you'll find them online, tipofaz.org for more information, and 445-4655 is the phone number. Listen to our coming segment here in just a moment, and this might be for you. A lot of the volunteers are ladies.
Yes.
Can you help me understand why that is?
Well, we hate to show prejudice against the men, but it seems like more women are into the caring field, I guess you might say,
yeah,
in that way, even though we do have several men in our group. And we also have couples who do it, so they go out together, a man and a woman. So, you know, I hate to exclude the men, but we just have more women.
One of your other volunteers one time told me, answered that question by saying men tend to want to fix things.
Yes.
And this a lot of times you can't fix, you can only help.
Yes. And that's frustrating. And not just men, but some people in certain fields. That was hard for me too, because when you're in the medical field, you're used to fixing. And so you have to step back and see what's important. So we can teach the men to do it, and but it's a little more difficult.
It becomes a bit more challenging. Yeah. In whichever, it seems natural, you just kind of tend to think, maybe this is my prejudice showing, but ladies is kind of more nurturing, more understanding, and more, it makes sense to me when you say that. We said what do the TIP volunteers do, and you described kind of, but literally on the ground what they'll do is, I mean, they'll help they'll answer phones, they'll literally have a shoulder to cry on. When a TIP volunteer walks into a situation, what might he or she be expected to physically do really do right there?
Well, let me explain that. And I like to start with saying each call is different, so they have to be able to do all whenever. First of all, they're going to be that ear to listen to them. We call it emotional first aid. They're going to know what to say, what not to say, so that they don't call what we call a second injury. They've already been traumatized by the event. Now we don't need people saying the wrong thing to make it worse. So they learn how to do that. But then they might make calls for them. Sometimes they're the liaison. When there has been a death that has occurred, there's so many things you have to know. And our volunteers are trained by all the emergency system on top of what to say and what not to say, but they're trained by there to know what the procedures are. So when a death has occurred, they have to know, is this going to be a medical examiner's case, or is this person going to the funeral home? Then they have to guide the family into, if their loved one's going to a funeral home, they have to guide them into now choosing one now, not tomorrow, now. And so there's a lot of those practical things, or they're looking for the resources they may need, maybe not right that day, but down the road. So
it's kind of like introducing ideally a very clear, nonpartisan mindset into what could be, what will be obviously in a very emotional, very traumatic time.
Yes, we're the one who can. It hasn't occurred to us. This tragedy did not happen to us, so we have the clear mind, and our goal is to assist them. So it's not about us, it's about them. If I have time, I have a quick example. I go on call still on both sides of the mountain, and I was on a call this side of the mountain a few months ago, and you're trying to find out what is important to them, and we call it a source of strength, something that's going to get them through this horrible tragedy. And I was with these parents whose son had died at a home, and there were a bunch of friends there. He was in his 40s, they were in their 60s, but what became important, they had arrived on scene at the home, and I was with all the friends, but what became important to them was to let the granddaughter, this gentleman's son, the gentleman who had died, his daughter, 12-year-old daughter, know that he had died, and she lived with her mom and they were divorced. So they need to go and let her know. They wanted to break the news to her,
right.
And that was important to them. But what was also extremely important to them was his body was not left alone, that somebody was looking over him. So that's what I told him I would do. I would stay there till they came to get him for the medical examiner's office. I would stay there. And then they called me a few months later and said, we just want to know, did you stay? And that was what was important to them. That gave them a source of strength.
Your role, the volunteers' role will be
for them.
Dictated on the ground,
Yes.
on the moment.
And very different each time,
Sure.
what you're going to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll take our second break a tiny bit early. I promise when we come back we'll talk about volunteers. I think it's important to kind of really get an understanding for what TIP does. And I think we've done that today. You've helped me understand that. When we come back, let's talk to the volunteers, the potential volunteers out there who might attend some of the training sessions coming up later this month. Our guest, Sue Rutherford, TIP of AZ, TIP, the Trauma Intervention Program, Countywide's back right after this.
Here in northern Arizona and throughout Yavapai County, people count on Orkin Pest Control. With over 100 years of combined experience, nobody knows how to protect your home or your business from harmful or annoying pests like the Orkin Man. To start service, contact your Northern Arizona Orkin Pest Control. In the Verde Valley, call 567-5100 or Orkin Pest Control in the Prescott area at 775-8772.
About the dangers of prescription drug abuse. The partnership at drugfree.org.
Hi, this is Fire Marshal Rick Contreras with the Cottonwood Fire Department. Do you have adequate defensible space around your home? Fire safety begins by cutting all weeds, brush, and dried vegetation around your property. Proper clearance of 30 to 50 feet dramatically increases your chances of your home surviving a fire. Create a clean zone by removing all flammable vegetation around your property. For more information, contact the Cottonwood Fire Department.
Hungry?
Yeah.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Welcome back to the program. Sue Rutherford, our guest today. The tipofaz.org, 445-4655 is the phone number to find out more. And right now we are going to talk about the volunteer training coming up. Beginning April 19th in Prescott, on April 26th in the Verde Valley. These training sessions will be multi-day. How does it work?
Yes, well, it always starts with a Thursday evening, Friday evening, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. So our first 4 days are the teaching them what to say, what not to say. We call it the emotional first aid. And then we have, I believe, 7 or 8 evenings after that throughout the month. It's spread out, usually Tuesday and Thursday, where they learn from the system. So the firefighters come in to train them how to work on a structure fire, what's I mean, they're not going to do the structure fire, but what their procedures are. Law enforcement come in to train them what goes on during crime scene. We have a hostage negotiator with the law enforcement who comes to talk to them about suicide and mental health and what goes on during negotiations. We have Red Cross, what they do, Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services, the hospital. They have to know a little bit about everything, you might say, so that when they're on a scene, they are the liaison and they understand the system, and then they can be the person dealing with the client.
There's a lot to learn. It's twofold, it seems like, the training really, from what you've just described. You've got to learn the patient care, but you've also got to learn how to work with, how to stay out of the way of the fire guys and who the person will be maybe to help, so it seems like there's really kind of two major elements to that. It
is. Very emotional side and very practical side. And we always joke with the volunteers, you have to learn not to cross that yellow tape, because you don't want your footprints and your fingerprints being taken. You have to learn where they want you to be so you can have.
Will the volunteer be called, like with the first responders? It sounds like you get rolling or get alerted pretty quickly.
Yes.
Sometimes for instance, if there's a scene of violence, someone's been injured, but the scene is not secure by police yet, even the fire guys don't go in.
Correct.
Obviously, that would hold true for the trauma intervention volunteers. But at what point are you, once a volunteer is called, they can probably assume that the scene is secure?
Yes, we will never be called to a situation or a scene if it's not safe. That's what they guarantee us. But we'll be put on standby like firefighters. We may be standing back, or they'll send us to the police department to be with the clients. We will never go to a home with domestic violence. They will, because you don't know what's going to reoccur there. So they'll have us with the client in a safe location.
Well, and there's a state agency that isn't there that pulls up onto those kinds of situations? Don't CPS not volunteers, but staff get called to those kinds of things?
Child Protective Services, yes, they do, but we're there within 20, 30 minutes. They're there 2 or 3 hours later. So it's just yesterday we had a crime call, kidnapping, and the children were there. They brought the man in with the children at the police department, and they had tips stay there. These children were traumatized, so while waiting for Child Protective Services.
Wow.
So we're the on scene.
In the training, start to finish, from that first intake session, if you will, through all of it, how many, say, hours of training will a volunteer go to before they go to their first
50, 55 hours of training.
Is that right?
Yes.
So there's quite a bit.
Yes, quite a bit. And it's spread out, so it's very doable, even for those who work full-time.
Yeah. The ideal volunteer, everyone can bring, but you're a nurse. I'd hate for everybody to think, well, I wasn't a nurse, I can't do this. Are there any skills that would especially come in handy, or do you just come and talk to us and we'll help you figure? And I'm sure you have a splash rate on volunteers. They come, maybe they start through the training and decide this isn't.
Yes. Well, before they even start, we like to interview them. We want them to really understand. What we're looking for are people that are compassionate and caring. We don't care about their background. About half of our volunteers have a background of maybe social work, nursing, or whatever. That does not matter. It doesn't help. What matters is they're compassionate. We can teach the rest. So about 50% will make it through, though, the program. And that usually, though, that's decided by the first night to see, and then the first evening is a screening. For them screening us, too.
Well, a wonderful program, indispensable, really, at this point, and our guest today is largely responsible for that, certainly in Yavapai County. Sue Rutherford, the Executive Director, tipofaz.org. One more time, 445-4655. Training coming up very soon, later this month in Prescott and the Verde Valley, and volunteers are needed. We thank you for joining us. Always insightful to have you come in. It is countywide, and we'll see you next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.